Alex, they say that if you want to know the true character of a man, don't look at his handshake, look at the inside corners of his living room, because crown molding is the one thing that will take a perfectly sane, competent human being and turn them into a person who throws a hammer through a piece of double pane glass at 3 in the afternoon.
Speaking from experience there, Tiger, or is that just a very specific hypothetical scenario? Because the last time I saw you working with trim, you were muttering something about the laws of Euclidean geometry being a personal insult to your family.
It's the three-dimensional betrayal that gets you. Most trim lives on a flat plane. Baseboards, that's just a 2D relationship with the floor. But crown is a bridge builder. It's trying to negotiate a peace treaty between a wall that's leaning left and a ceiling that's sagging like an old clothesline. It exists in this weird gravity-defying tilt, and the moment you think you've got the angle figured out, the house reminds you that square is just a suggestion architects make to keep themselves feeling important.
See, this is why I just use caulk. If the gap is smaller than a hot dog, caulk is the answer. But seriously, why is crown specifically the boss fight of finished carpentry? We've got compound miter saws that cost more than my first car. Shouldn't this be a solved science by now?
The saw is only as smart as the person holding the pencil, Alex. And when it comes to crown, the pencil is usually lying to you. The fundamental secret, the thing that separates the folks who finish the job from the folks who leave the trim in the garage for 6 years, is understanding the spring angle.
The spring angle sounds like a rejected Bond movie title.
It's the angle at which the molding sits against the wall. Most of the stuff you buy at the big box stores is either 38 degrees or 45 degrees. If you don't know which one you're holding, you're basically trying to do a crossword puzzle in a different language. If you set your saw for a 45-degree spring, but your molding is designed for 38, your corners will look like a shark took a bite out of them. There's no amount of painter's glue that can fix a quarter-inch gap at eye level.
Okay, so step 1, know your molding. But even then, I've seen you, and everyone else on the internet, cutting the stuff upside down and backwards. It looks like a magic trick where the magician is also confused. Why can't we just lay it flat and cut a 45?
Because your saw table is the ceiling and the fence is the wall. It's upside down and backwards. It feels like trying to brush your teeth in a mirror while standing on your head. But here's the logic. When you nest it in the saw exactly how it sits on the wall, just inverted, you only have to worry about a simple miter cut. You're letting the saw's geometry do the heavy lifting. The problem is, our brains are hardwired to see the top as the top. I once spent an entire Saturday afternoon cutting the same corner 4 times because I kept flipping the damn thing the way I thought it should go. By the end of the day, I had a pile of expensive firewood and a very concerned wife.
I've seen those firewood piles. They're very impressive. But let's say I get the cut right. I climb the ladder, I've got my trim, and I realize my 1970s drywall isn't actually a 90-degree corner. It's more of an abstract interpretation of a corner. What then?
The wavy wall blues. This is where the pros distinguish themselves from the weekend warriors. You can't just nail it and hope for the best. You need backing. One of the best moves you can make is ripping some triangular blocks out of scrap 2x4s and nailing those into the top plate of the wall first. It gives you a solid landing pad. Instead of searching for a stud that's 3 inches away from where you need to nail, you've got a continuous strip of wood behind that crown.
That's actually useful. I usually just fire the nail gun until I hear a thud instead of a ping.
Please don't do that. You'll end up hitting a plumbing line, and then we're doing a podcast about the best shop vacs for flooded basements. But speaking of corners, let's talk about the great debate, mitering versus coping.
Yes, I was waiting for this. Most people just miter both sides and call it a day. But the real carpenters always talk about coping like it's a sacred ritual. Is it just for bragging rights, or is there a functional reason to spend 20 minutes with a handsaw on one joint?
It's not about ego, Alex. It's about physics. Wood moves, houses breathe. When the humidity hits in July, that house is going to expand, and in January, it's going to shrink like a cheap t-shirt. If you miter an inside corner, that's 2 45-degree angles meeting, they're going to pull apart. You'll see a black line of shadow right in the crotch of the corner within 6 months.
And coping prevents that?
Exactly. You run one piece of trim square into the corner, then on the second piece, you cut a miter just to see the profile line. You take your coping saw and you back cut along that wavy line, hollowing out the meat behind it. Essentially, you're creating a cap that fits perfectly over the face of the first board. If the walls move, the cop joint just slides a tiny bit, but it stays tight. It's like a puzzle piece. It's the difference between a job that looks good for the listing photos and a job that looks good 10 years later.
I tried coping once. I ended up with a piece of wood that looked like it had been chewed on by a very determined beaver. Is there a trick to not destroying the delicate little details of the molding?
Patience and a sharp blade, and maybe a little magic. I like to take a file, specifically a round rat tail file, to clean up the tight curves after the saw has done the rough work. And if you're working with pre-primed MDF, which a lot of folks do now, you have to be careful. That stuff crumbles if you look at it too hard. If the profile is too complex to cope, well, sometimes you just have to miter it and use a high-quality wood glue that won't let go. But don't tell the purists I said that.
Your secret is safe with me and several thousand listeners. But what about the rolling trick? I saw a video where a guy was talking about rolling the molding to fix a gap. Is that just a fancy way of saying bend it until it works?
It's more subtle than that. If you find your miter isn't closing up at the bottom, it's usually because the molding is sitting too flat against the wall. If you roll the bottom of the molding out just 1/8 of an inch, it changes the geometry of the miter face. It's like a secret adjustment knob. Most people think their saw is off, but 90% of the time, it's just the way the molding is seated.
So it's less about the angle of the blade and more about the attitude of the wood?
Precisely. Wood has a lot of attitude, especially crown.
Let's talk about the lone wolf problem. Installing 16-foot stretches of crown alone is basically a slapstick comedy waiting to happen. You've got one end in your hand, you're on a ladder, and the other end is 3 rooms away, slowly falling toward a glass coffee table. How do you survive that without a second person?
I once tried to use my head to hold up one end of a mahogany run while I nailed the other. I looked like a very distressed Atlas holding up a very expensive sky. Eventually, I realized that dead man supports are your best friend. Even just a simple block of wood nailed into the wall a few inches below where the crown will sit. You rest the far end on that block, walk back to your end, nail it in, and then go back and pop the block off. Or, if you're feeling fancy, they sell these clever little clips that hold the trim for you.
Or you could just call a friend? I know, independence and all that.
A friend? In this economy? Seriously though, if you're doing this solo, the measured length is your enemy. Houses are never as long as your tape measure says they are. I like to cut my long pieces a smidge long, maybe 1/16 of an inch. You spring it into place, you put both ends in the corners, and the middle bows out toward you, then you push the middle in. It creates a tension fit that keeps those corners tight without needing 40 nails.
A smidge. Very scientific, Tiger.
It's a technical term, just like a hair or a whisker. If you're not using whiskers as a unit of measurement, are you even a craftsman?
Fair enough. What about the finish? We put all this work into these perfect copes and springing the wood, and then we have to hide the evidence. Every time I fill nail holes, it looks like the trim has chicken pox.
The secret is in the smear. Don't just glob wood filler in there. Use a wood tone wax stick for stained wood or a high-quality shrink-free spackle for painted trim. And for the love of all that is holy, don't sand the filler until it's bone dry. If you sand it while it's still gummy, you just pull it right back out of the hole. Also, Alex, and I see this all the time, don't caulk the bottom of the crown to a wavy wall unless you're prepared to spend hours making that caulk line look straight. Sometimes a tiny shadow line looks better than a zigzag of white goo.
Wait, the master of trim is telling me not to caulk? Is the world ending?
I'm saying caulk with intention. Use it to hide the sins of the house, not as a substitute for a good fit. If your joint is so big you could park a bike in it, caulk isn't trim carpentry, it's masonry.
Okay, so know your spring angle, cut it upside down, cope your way through life, use backing blocks, and don't park your bike in the joints. Anything else before I go ruin my living room?
Just one thing, the first corner is always a sacrificial lamb. Don't start on the wall that people see when they first walk in. Start in the closet or over the fridge, somewhere that your first 3 mistakes can live in peace, hidden from the judgmental eyes of your mother-in-law.
That is the most practical advice you've ever given. Hide your shame in the closet.
It's handled me well for 30 years, but honestly, the feeling you get when that final piece snaps into place and the corners vanish, it's worth the gray hairs. It's the difference between a house feeling like a collection of drywall boxes and a home that feels finished.
Well, I'm inspired. I'm also terrified, but mostly inspired.
That's the sweet spot. If you aren't a little scared of the miter saw, you aren't paying attention. At the end of the day, crown molding is just a lesson in patience. Most of the mistakes we make in the shop or in the house come from trying to force a result that the wood isn't ready to give yet. You can't bully a house into being square. You have to listen to where it's crooked and negotiate the difference. That's the real secret. It's not about the saw, it's about the compromise.
The art of carpentry negotiation. I like it.
Maybe that'll be the title of my memoir, if I ever finish the trim in my own hallway.
We both know that's never happening.
Truth hurts, Alex. Join us next time at the Den, where we'll talk about something much easier, like completely rebuilding a vintage lathe with no manual.
Can't wait. See ya, Tiger.
Stay sharp, folks.